I think we will make a start. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. As I just said, it's a very warm and sunny afternoon here. It's also really lovely to see some familiar names and faces in the list of attendees as well. So, I really appreciate you taking the time out of what I know are very busy schedules to join us this afternoon. The title of today's session is one that you have probably heard before. You may have even said it to me before. And that is that we need this in 12 languages. It sounds like a very straightforward request. The content already exists. The client knows which languages they want. Surely it's just a case of translating it and moving on. But in my experience, it can occasionally get a little bit more complicated than that. That one sentence can hide a whole myriad of other decisions kind of lying beneath the surface, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's what I'm going to talk you through over the next 20 minutes or so. Today's session is not about teaching you how translation works. It's about helping you ask the right questions before localization even starts. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you a very simple framework on how we can do that from working with learning agencies, in-house learning and development teams over the last sort of 9, 10 years or so. And hopefully you'll walk away with a very practical set of next steps in terms of how you can build that into conversations with your clients. So before we get started, I will just quickly introduce myself to anybody who has not met me before. My name is Emily. I'm General Manager here at Comtec Translations. I'm also Head of Client Partnerships, and I specialize in all of the learning and development clients here at Comtec. I've worked in localization for just over 9 years now, and during that time, I have specialized in L&D training localization. That means that I spend quite a lot of my day talking to people who work in the industry, hearing a lot about the challenges that are facing everybody working in that space, and kind of what's going on when it comes to having conversations with your clients, so especially around localization. Um, I am account director for all of our L&D clients here at Comtec, including agencies and also in-house teams at international brands like those mentioned on my screen. Outside of work, I'm also director on the board of the Learning Network, which is a UK-based community aimed at supporting people who work in learning and development. So both in and outside of work, I really am kind of getting to the heart of what's going on in this space. What we're going to be talking about today is very much kind of my day to day in terms of how I support my clients. Also, a little bit of information about Comtec in case you're brand new to us, and just to understand where all these recommendations are coming from. We are specialised in translation and localization. We are the UK's first B Corp certified translation company, which means we hold ourselves to incredibly high standards, not just in the way that we support our clients, but also in our wider network of linguists, our local community, and the wider environment as well. We offer support in over 250 different languages. I've been going for over 4 decades. I think we're getting close to 45 if we've not hit that already. And in order to deliver all of those 250 languages, we have a growing global network of linguists. I think we've exceeded 4,000 now. That's growing day on day across all of those languages and services that we support with. And we are a full service agency as well. So we don't just support with straightforward text translation. We often will do things like image localization, video translation, subtitles, voiceover, and also implementing translations back within software like e-learning, digital learning authoring tools, for example. And finally, to round it off, we are a learning network industry partner, which means that we really do know our stuff when it comes to learning localization. So, what is it that we are going to talk about today? I have deliberately kept this session very practical. I really want to focus on the decisions that make multilingual projects easier to manage, easier to talk about, and easier to deliver. So, we're going to start by looking at why sometimes localization can get a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. I will share our 5 key questions that you should be asking before pricing or quoting for a multilingual project. I'm going to give you a model to help you scope like localization a lot easier. I'm going to help you look at matching learning content to the right approach, which is so important now, especially as AI has kind of changed the game when it comes to localization. And I'm going to give you some hints and tips on how to talk to your clients about localization really confidently as well. And finally, anybody who has joined us live today, there'll be a little special offer for you there at the end, as well as an idea of what will be coming your way as a thank you for attending today. So let's start with a very simple question. Why do multilingual learning projects sometimes feel a little bit tricky? If you have worked on one before, you will probably have your own answer and your own experience for this. It could be maybe there were endless review rounds, maybe the timeline slipped a little bit, maybe there was a new deliverable that popped up halfway through the project that kind of hadn't been accounted for in the original scope. Maybe every country wanted something a little bit different. But what's interesting is that when that happens, it's very rarely down to the actual translation itself. More often, it's about the questions and decisions that fit behind it. So the brief might say, we need this in 12 languages. What this actually means is thinking about all these other things that kind of go into that process. So, which markets are these translations for? Are there any priority audiences that sit within that list? Is there anything that maybe we need to look at and change in the English source content before we go to translation? Which level of translation are you going to use? It's no longer a case of just a yes or no. It's actually a case of, do we want AI involved in the process? What level of human intervention do we need with that AI? And so on and so forth. You might have videos in your project. So, do you want subtitles? Do you want voiceover? Do you want just a transcript within the course? There's so many options there depending on a myriad of different factors. Who is going to be in charge of reviewing those translations, and what are your expectations for each of those review stages? How are you going to manage all of that feedback, and how are you going to handle all those different versions, and what does that final sign-off process look like? So I'm going to talk through all those in a little bit more detail throughout this session today. But in a nutshell, it's just one line in the brief often, but it can also mean a dozen, 15 different things that you need to think about. And it's easiest to think about them at this sort of initial scoping stage. So let's have a little look now on what are the kind of most common blockers when it comes to a localization project and how we can kind of avoid some of these. For example, one of the biggest challenges that clients will often talk to me about is that review stage. So how can we make this as smooth as possible? A really easy win is actually finding reviewers upfront rather than waiting for translation to be ready for review. It's having those conversations with your clients, with your team, and identifying who in the local markets will be responsible for reviewing and signing off content. And it is very important that those people are based in the local market to make sure that they are in touch as much as possible with the local market preferences and have that authority to sign off and make those decisions. You also want to be reviewing, agreeing what those review stages look like. For example, a lot of our projects, especially when working with a new client, we will build a sample stage in upfront. It doesn't have to be big, it can be 500, 1,000 words, just a couple of minutes of learning content, but it does give a really early opportunity to be given feedback and guiding the direction of the rest of the project. Especially if you are using AI in the process, it's a really important opportunity to be checking that that output is aligned with expectations and that it is actually a decision that everybody's comfortable with before you get too far into the project. It can also help you avoid things like endless rewrite cycles, any changes that pop up that are actually out of scope, and obviously any delays to project delivery as well, which everybody is very keen to avoid. Also, another really important early decision that you could be making, and maybe one that sounds really straightforward and obvious, but I think it's worth flagging anyway, is just confirming what that scope involves. Have you got a module that's got embedded videos? Are you going to be subtitling those? If not, is that really clearly spelled out in the scope that actually embedded images are going to be left in English, or there's just going to be a transcript, for example? Because all of those conversations up front will help you avoid any last minute project add-ons, any updates that need to be made to the quote or the project schedule, and any unseen costs and delays that happen there as well. I've mentioned AI already, but I think just worth touching on that again now. When you're working with a translation partner and you're having these very early project discussions, scoping conversations, that kind of thing, ask your translation partner to support with providing samples, especially if you're going down the route of exploring AI. It can help you kind of determine upfront if that is an approach that everybody's on board with. That also goes for AI voiceover and things like that as well. There is quite a lot of misinformation out there in terms of what AI can and can't and should and shouldn't do. So making it really clear, giving the client a specific proof of concept in terms of what they can expect on their live project, again, gets you ahead of any potential challenges down the road or any misalignment of expectations. And finally, have a little think about any local linguistic requirements. For example, any regional variants of a language, Latin American Spanish versus Mexican Spanish versus European Spanish, for example. If a specific region wants formal versus informal, a challenge we see quite often is German will want the Sie versus Du, that's the formal versus the informal. If they don't communicate that or share that up front, and it's actually quite late in the project, that can have quite a large scale impact on the delivery of a project. It's just one word, but it does impact a lot of the grammar throughout the course, and it can take quite a lot of work to update that. So getting ahead of those conversations can again help you avoid any kind of unwanted project delays. So as you can see here, localization isn't really just one big problem. It can sometimes be a handful of different questions and challenges that you need to kind of bear in mind at these early stages of conversation. So what can you be doing to get ahead of some of these blockers, challenges, potential kind of avenues for complication? I have listed here 5 questions that I think can really help you in those early conversations with clients. So, the first one is what kind of learning content are we talking about here? What kind of content are we building? What does that learner experience look like? Is it just a product demo or systems training, or is it actually something a little bit more complex or challenging? I've put here, systems training is not the same as D&I, and I recognize that that is teaching you all to suck eggs, but I think it's really important here because it does have an impact on the approach that you want to take when it comes to localization. Similarly, if we're thinking about the objective or the impact of the learning, communicating information, transmitting information is very different to wanting to influence or change behavior. And one of those approaches will likely need more human intervention than the other. What formats are involved here? Is it just a case of an e-learning module? Are there embedded images? Are there downloadable files? Are there videos to consider as well? A lot of automated translation tools are fantastic at grabbing content within a module. They don't necessarily pick up those embedded or downloadable assets. So that's just something for you to think about in terms of, is there another approach that is needed here? Is it a little bit more effort or a different approach that's needed to that content versus the learning content? Have you built that into the scope and the project plan and all of those things as well? Also, how are you going to ensure consistency between two different translation approaches as well is probably worth thinking about. Which languages and markets do you really need? Again, probably sounds quite straightforward and obvious, but you'd be surprised. For example, South Africa has got something like 11 official languages. Not everybody knows that. They might just ask for something like South African, and you need to kind of clarify which languages you're looking for. Similar with India as well. There are so many languages that are spoken in a particular country. It's important to kind of narrow down where your target market is and the language requirements that fit with that. And finally, that review process. I've talked about it already, but it is so important. Also, kind of clarifying expectations for that review stage as well. Typically, with our translation projects, we're not asking local reviewers to be doing a quality check or a proofreading of translations, but they are looking for company specific quirks that an external translator just might not be exposed to. For example, Disney will refer to cast members, so the people who dress up as Disney characters, walk around the parks, perform in shows. They will use the English term cast member across every different language, and you might not necessarily know that unless you are living, breathing Disney all day as part of your job. So that's just an example of something that isn't necessarily wrong if it was translated, but it would be an obvious giveaway that, the text has come from outside of the company. And just a little hint as to one of the things that will be coming your way after today's session is a localization planning checklist, just kind of include all these questions as well as some other things that you might want to think about during the process. So, what are the benefits for thinking about all of these things up front? Obviously, for your team, you're going in a lot quicker, a lot more confidently with the project quote and plan that you've put together. Means it's much easier to be managing resources and timelines. You've got a really solid idea of what those review cycles look like. You've been able to build in some kind of buffer and protection around your margins to be really sure about that revenue. And your team is spending less time putting out fires as well. For your client, the benefits are also super obvious. They've got a better idea of when they can start to receive deliverables. They have got complete confidence in those go live dates. They feel like it's a much smoother, less chaotic process. You've also got that kind of feeling that it's a better learning experience as well. If you've been able to match content to the right localization approach, whether that is AI, whether it is some kind of human intervention, human review, you've got that confidence that you're giving the learner the most effective localization there. And also, it means that you are in a better position to be managing your stakeholders, making your client happy. In essence, the more questions, the better questions that you ask earlier and upfront, the fewer nasty surprises there will be later down the line. So we talked a little bit then about mapping content types to localization approaches. And I think it can be quite tricky at first to kind of know how to do that. It's worth saying that that does very much differ project by project, client by client. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a framework now on how you can think about doing that. So you can see on the screen here, there are four separate localization approaches, although I prefer to think of them as kind of sitting along a spectrum. And they really do kind of progress from zero human intervention all the way through to kind of a fully human, creative driven service level. And each of these different service levels will be appropriate and recommended for different things. And even within that, there will be different preferences within individual clients, individual markets as to the approach that people want to take. On the one end, you have got kind of a fully automated AI-driven service level, which we call machine translation with automated post-editing or MTAP. That is, in our opinion, the best fit for kind of low-risk content, anything that's more technical or informative, anything that's kind of quite heavy in terminology, also anything that's super high volume. If you've got hundreds and hundreds of courses, odds are the budget is not necessarily in place to be able to do a full bells and whistles localization approach. But what MTAP will help you do is get through that content. It will deliver a fully localized learning experience in a way that will prioritize speed and budget as well as everything else. You've then got the element of human review, human post editing, and again, that can vary from a kind of basic level where we're just checking for minor, major errors, through then to kind of really reviewing and refining the fluency and the style behind the AI as well. And then you've got a fully human translation, which these days does tend to be reserved for those languages where AI still isn't quite as strong. So things like Arabic, Hebrew, Thai, for example, where the AI isn't quite there in terms of delivering the quality quite yet. So, how do you pick the right approach for the job? Again, that will very much depend on the priority of your client and where they kind of want to dedicate the most resource. They might have a priority set of modules that are being launched on a global scale. They want to dedicate the most resource. This is really strategically important for them. They have to have it go well. They don't want to take any risks. That's where you would dedicate more human resource to refining, reviewing the translation output. There might be a very basic module. It might be for induction purposes or just a refresher that not necessarily has got that much strategic importance behind it. That might be where they take a more automated approach, for example. But it can be completely different depending on the client that you're working with and what their individual priorities are. All of this, all these slides, the content categorization framework, all of that I will share after today's course so that you can comb through it in a little bit more detail. And of course, I am available for questions after today's session as well. I just wanted to give you here a little bit of an example of where that human input can add value. I think it's really important to say that raw machine translation and MTAP, with the automated post editing, absolutely has its place and it solves so many challenges in terms of getting content localized quickly. But you can see here the difference between a raw machine translation and then one that has been post edited by a linguist. There's nothing especially wrong with the left-hand side. It is accurate against the original German, which isn't on screen, but you'll just have to take my word for it. There's nothing missing, there's no grammatical errors, but it does kind of read a little bit unnaturally. Like it's fine, and if all you need is fine, that's absolutely good to go. But you can see on the right-hand side, there's nothing that's really been added. There's no new information there, but the terminology is just a little bit more natural. The style and the fluency is a little bit more considered, and it just reads a little bit more stylistically as well. So it's all about kind of where your priorities are. If it's speed, if it's volume, if it's budget, then a more automated process might be the way forward. If you have got things like style considerations to bear in mind, if your client's got a very distinct tone of voice, there's a lot of cosmetic brands out there, for example, that will have be very distinctive in the way they talk to customers. Then that might be a consideration that you want to build into your localization approach. So, how do you take all of this and talk to your clients about it? I think it's really important to note here that you're not just selling translation. You are using translation to be a strategic consultant to your client. So instead of just saying things like, we'll handle translation, it's helping them map the right approach, as we've talked about already. You might not necessarily want to give them a flat fee. You might want to help them decide where's best to allocate their budget. You want to be talking about localization as early as possible in the project stage. Not only can it impact the way that you build your content and the way that you design your courses and all of the assets that go behind that, but it also might be a factor in the way that you're kind of having other conversations as well. You might want to avoid kind of any culturally specific references, for example, in the English master or storyboard. You also want to be proactive about building that review stage. I've talked about it already, but rather than being reactive in the way that local feedback comes in, actually planning for it and putting a process behind it is a key factor in making sure that a localization project runs smoothly. Also, might be something that you need to build into project costs, especially if there's going to be multiple rounds of review and updates there. It's really important that you kind of consider that as early as possible in the project stage. And finally, here are some questions that we have definitely been asked. I'm sure that you have been asked as well, but how you could maybe, answer them confidently in conversations with clients. So, should we use AI or human? Might not necessarily be that straightforward. It could be a case of asking them, what's your goal? What's your objective? What are the languages that will have an impact on whether AI is the right fit or not? What are the risks of getting it wrong? Are there legal or financial ramifications? Is that a risk you want to take with a purely AI driven solution? Give them samples so that they can make a fully informed decision. There's lots of different ways that you can kind of tackle that conversation. Likewise, I've had a lot of conversations recently with clients talking about consistency and terminology. That is a challenge with automated translation tools, but one that there is often a solution or a workaround for that. So, a lot of inbuilt automated translation tools might have a glossary function. Use your translation partner to help you build those glossaries so that you have got control over that consistency of terminology as much as possible. If you are able to work with a translation partner within a computer assisted translation tool, translation memory software, that is your best resource for keeping terminology consistent because it's something that can be reused time and time and again. It can be used as reference. You're able to store client feedback in there as well so that you can look that up for future projects. And also, your translation partner will be able to keep a really consistent translation team as well, using the same linguist to get to know the idiosyncrasies of a particular end client, the way that they prefer to talk, whether they like to use the formal or informal, which terms they like to keep in English. All of these things will help you kind of maintain that consistency across a series of different projects. And finally, I keep talking about it, but the review process, it's really, really crucial to make sure that that goes as smoothly as possible. So I've just put a reminder there of all the things that you can be doing to kind of make that as smooth as possible up front. So we're coming to the end of today's session. So I will leave you here with just some key takeaways from today. First of all, hopefully you've got the point by now. But multilingual projects are much easier when localization is discussed at the very start. If you're briefing in somebody late, it can mean that things are rushed. It might mean there's extra review rounds or actually no time for review at all. It's much harder to kind of have control over a project that hasn't had that preparation time, although not impossible. You've got those 5 questions that will help you be more confident in how you're scoping translation projects. And again, lean on your translation partner. If you don't know the answers, they will help you find them. They will give you the tools that you need to kind of put together a really solid plan. Different content needs different localization approaches. Something that's really terminology driven, really straightforward language, great fit for AI if the language combination is right. Something that is more aimed at influencing behavior, triggering an emotional response, that might be where you need to prioritize human review there. And finally, AI does work best when it's used strategically, not necessarily universally. It's not a blanket solution. It's brilliant. It does so many different things, but it is still very much a tool that sits within the wider toolkit rather than a replacement for all of these specialist services. And it can be used and should be used at the right moments with somebody who knows what they're doing. Just a little shout out as well for how we can support learning agencies. We are always on hand to help with all of these things, helping you scope a project, putting together quotes for your clients, helping you review content and sharing our recommendations for the right approach, depending on what your client's priority or budget or timeline might look like. We can do sessions on all the different options when it comes to AI translation. We can support with terminology, building glossaries, style guidelines, all those things that can support with translation, especially AI translation. Those can be really useful assets for you there. We can wrangle your reviewers for you. That is something that we do a lot of the time. We've got multilingual, multimedia localization support, and we can often just work behind the scenes. If you're preferring to kind of manage that client facing, we can do all of the behind the scene work to support you there. And finally, we can also join discovery calls to help you manage these conversations with potential clients and existing clients and just give you that confidence that you're asking all the right information and that you have all the answers in your back pocket there. So thank you very much, everybody who has joined us today. anybody who has joined us and wants to chat through something, there's absolutely no strings attached, no pressure there. But please feel free to get in touch with a project brief, a project scope, and we can talk you through it. We'll help you review it and put together the right fit for your client. There's a QR code there that takes you to book in a call with me. I've also put my email and my direct dial there for you as well, if at any stage you want to discuss a project or anything else that we've talked about in today's session as well. And coming to your inbox very soon, over the next week or so, I will be sharing these really practical resources that will help you in all of these conversations. You've got a planning checklist, a project planner, an approach guide, and a 6 steps to localization success. So thank you very much. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop me an email, set up a call, and I'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much, and I will speak to you soon.